How do we show up in the world? And how do our questions shape our leadership? Meet your host, Daniela Forni. He is the self-titled data shaman and, in his own words, a high-pitched amateur podcaster and wannabe influencer. As an executive coach, he lives at the intersection of corporate life and philosophy. Welcome to the Sage and the CEO podcast. Today, we are taking a trip to the classroom. As part of the Coaching Journey's Conversations from Cambridge series, Danielle is interviewing his classmates to uncover what drives them, why they chose this path, and the leadership advice they value most. It's a fascinating conversation. You do not want to miss this one.
Welcome everyone to Coaching Journeys, Conversations from Cambridge, and I'm here with Richard. First question that I ask is usually, what brought you to this program? Why do you think becoming an executive coach is something that fits into your very storied career?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it stems from the 30-odd years I've spent in leadership positions in businesses around the world, some small, some large. I've had some successes and some equally spectacular failures. And I think that what has attracted me to coaching is the opportunity to help others who are embarking on their own journeys to maybe fulfill their own potential with perhaps a little bit less drama than I had to go through, and perhaps to do that in a more elegant fashion, to find their own solutions in their own way. But that appeals to me very much, to be able to share other people's journeys and help them fulfill their potential.
Do you have a couple of examples of what drama means, or what are the challenges that you found in your career?
I think one of the most significant milestones in my whole career happened when I was still quite young. So I was the CEO of a business at the age of late 20s, I think maybe early 30s. And it was a subsidiary of a larger company that itself got acquired. And so I found myself part of a much bigger organization and being evaluated more professionally than I had at any other stage of my career up until then. So this company that had acquired us had some professional coaches to come in to evaluate the effectiveness of the leadership. And one of the exercises they did was to take me and my team, my immediate team, away for an effectiveness facilitation. I think that's what they called it. And the idea, the first morning, 9 o'clock bright, we all arrived, and I was quite excited about all of this, and quite proud that we'd been acquired and everything was apparently going quite well. And they brought us into a room, no chairs, no tables, quite a big room. I think there were 8 of us, so myself and 7 people that were in my leadership team. And they said, right, we want you to walk around the room and stop when the positions that you're standing in reflect the effectiveness of your working relationships. And I thought, well, this is really quite interesting, so I'll go with it. And I stood still to start with, and I thought maybe everybody would come and stand around me. And they didn't, and they started walking elsewhere, and I started to follow them around, and everywhere I went, everybody seemed to walk off. Until in the end, I was kind of on my own, and literally the rest of my team, all of the people that reported to me, were outside in a big group on the terrace on a lovely sunny day next to the River Thames. I mean, it was really embarrassing and excruciating and painful, and I really didn't understand what was going on. Anyway, of course, they brought us all together, and it turns out that in the debriefing that I understood that my style of leadership was basically control freakery. As long as people did what I wanted them to do in the way that I thought was the right way to do it, then everything was fine. But, if they challenged or they had different ideas or whatever, they really... Actually, they'd stopped even bothering to tell me about things like that, or they just were getting on with things and were almost working around my leadership style. And this was really quite dramatic for me to realize that I thought that I was being an effective leader, but actually it was terribly ineffective on almost every level, despite actually the business on the surface apparently performing reasonably well. And so this changed my whole understanding of my effect on other people as a leader, and the need for me to listen to other people and to take account of other people's views, even if they didn't necessarily agree with mine, to involve and engage them in decision making, and all aspects of leadership, really, all the various aspects of leadership that make an effective leader, a modern effective leader, I needed to relearn, essentially. And so that I went into embarked on coaching, because the upshot of this program was that each of us individually and collectively had access to coaching, which was the first time in my career. And I think and I hope and that since then I've become a much better leader progressively, and coaching kind of changed my world. I suppose, my interest in this goes back a really long way, but it stems from quite a dramatic experience, if you like, early on in my career, which I'm glad happened. I mean, otherwise I would never have come to that realization.
When, especially when you lead an organization, or even when you lead like a small team or a function, I always see it as a spectrum between being directive and say like controlling, and be a bit more pushy, coaching, guiding people and whatnot. Over the years, like, how did you balance effectively the result that the company needs to provide to the shareholders with, let's say, the need for a healthy human environment?
Well, I don't think you can separate the two, actually. That a healthy human environment, as you describe it, is a prerequisite for long-term sustained success. Because people in any environment, we're emotional actors, so we don't act on logic. So even if logically a course of action would be sensible for the business or for our careers, we act because we want to do something, as opposed to because it's rationally good for us to do it. And I think once you begin to understand that human beings, by and large, and there's lots of research that evidences this, act from an emotional perspective to begin with, and then post-rationalize what they have done, then you realize actually you have to connect with people on a human emotional level in order for them to be engaged and for them to do a good job, to fulfill their potential. So I don't think there is a need to try and balance one against the other. Results stem from effective human relationships in the workplace, especially between the leader and the other people in the business. So I think they're entirely compatible, and in fact, success is dependent on the other.
I see. Then I have a bit of a rhetorical question. Then why bad managers and bad leaders still exist? What do you think is the reason behind it?
I think it's fear. I mean, I spent a lot of my early career afraid of making wrong decisions or things going wrong that would reflect badly on me or the way people might think about me. I think humans are, we are driven by fear, at least in part. I mean, not everything we do is governed by that, but it's a significant driver for people. So I think leaders, autocratic leaders, and the more autocratic they are, the more, I think this is true, they are afraid of loss of control. And so then it's the ultimate paradox. The more you try to control, the worse it will be when that control is relinquished, which it must be, because control is an illusion. So I think that poor leadership stems from a very human place, which is fear of loss of control, fear of loss of face or status. And we see it we see it all the time. We see it in world leaders, right now. Their behaviors are ultimately designed to give them the illusion of control. And for a period of time, that may appear to work. But ultimately, it's not sustainable.
That's very interesting, because again, there's also like when I coach leaders or team heads, I can see in some situation where their manager might be a bit of a control freak, or somebody sort of like there's a bit more authoritative. But sometimes I also feel that the coachee behaves in that way. How do you, if you see a person that has those kind of traits, how would you approach the conversation with the person? How would you try as a coach to help him or her or they to come to terms or to change?
I think that's a really good question, because I think it comes down to awareness, self-awareness, and the awareness of the effect of behaviors on other people. I mean, there's some I don't want to digress too far from the question, but I think it's worth bringing in an example of some fascinating research conducted by Paul Zak at Claremont University in California. This was some years ago, maybe 5 years ago or so. And it looked at the effectiveness of leadership from a trust perspective. So what leads to trust in a business, in an organization, or in human relationships in general, and then the effect of enhanced trust in an organization on performance. And the reason I find it fascinating is because it goes to the heart of kind of us as human beings and how we connect with people. And it's all to do with oxytocin, which is maybe your listeners may be aware, is the love hormone. It's what brings us together, what binds us together. And if we trust people, if we demonstrate trust, then they experience a release of oxytocin, which makes them significantly less stressed, makes them more committed to us, makes them more willing to try harder to achieve common goals. And if we give freedom to people to act in ways that they themselves choose, that trust is enhanced. They then demonstrate trust back to us, which in turn releases oxytocin in us as leaders. And you end up with this mutually reinforcing patterns of behavior. And this is not just, it's not just neuroscience in it from a chemical perspective, it has real life examples. So he conducted this research over a period of time with various organizations, and some of it was arguably controversial in the sense that they took blood samples from people and measured levels of oxytocin and then measured the effectiveness of organizations based on the presence of oxytocin. But essentially, these businesses had higher levels of engagement, less absenteeism, higher levels of retention, more energy, less stress, more productivity. I mean, these were real life, real, genuine business results that came through. Coming back to your question about how does a coach help a leader realize that, I think it goes back to asking the open questions, allowing the leader to understand where those behaviors, where the lack of trust, where this control desire comes from. Where does it come from originally? Have they always had that? Is that at what point in their past did they first notice that they were like this? And sometimes it goes back to childhood. Other times, it might be related to a career episode or something that happened, an event that happened. But I think when people become aware of the origin of that lack of trust in others, they can then make a decision for themselves as to whether or not they want to explore a different way of behaving and then trying that and seeing what the results are. Again, you're still battling this fear, of course, in all of us, that if we let go of something that has helped us to survive up until now and succeed up until now, what might happen? So there is always overcoming that. But I think helping people to be aware of why they behave the way they behave at least gives them a choice about whether or not they change that behavior.
You mentioned something that is very important in coaching and in therapy and in relationship, which is self-awareness. And I often find that, and I'm sure that as you explain, like you do often, is that when you ask questions, when you have a partnership with a coachee, is often about try to find ways for the other person to be more self-aware, to understand a bit more about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a bit of an intro for a bit of a cheeky question. What's your favorite question that you ask a coachee, especially at the beginning? Is there something that you go to that you think it gives you already some answers?
Not really, because a favorite question, because I think every context is different. So people are even people who coachees that are maybe presenting fundamentally the same theme, if you like, or the same broad topic, their starting position often can be very different. So some people come to coaching aware of a lack of confidence, for example. Others come already aware that actually it's a lack of confidence that may be an obstacle in helping them to move forward. Others come to coaching perhaps without that awareness, and actually the underlying problem is a lack of awareness. So I think the starting point can be very different for different coaches, even if the problem is the same. So I think coaching relies on a very open approach to using the appropriate questions at the right time with the right people. And so I don't think there is one killer. Let's start with this question and that will open the door, and then everything will, 3 sessions later, we've miraculously solved all problems. It would be great. If you find one, let me know what it is, and then I'll start using it.
I'm still looking for it, but I will not stop asking this question because
Maybe someone will have one.
Yeah, another person I was interviewing, he said, "Have you been today?" Which is like, yeah, that is getting closer to something that you can use all the time, and actually you can maybe get a lot from it. But as you said, I really appreciate, and it really resonates with me, that each situation, each moment of the conversation is different, and it needs to be tailored and bespoke to the particular context. As we are reaching the end of this conversation, is there a skill that a leader in 2026 should have, or what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, personally, I don't think the leadership skills or approaches that are required today are all that different to what good leadership has ever done. I think it starts with, of course, there's huge uncertainty at the moment, but then there's always been uncertainty. Maybe it's a little bit more visible at the moment. Maybe the pace of change is faster, arguably, than it's ever been. Who knows? Maybe we're just seeing it more. But I think it's having a really big, clear, unambiguous vision that everybody can understand and commit to, assuming they choose to commit to it, assuming that people come to an organization, or at least stay in an organization, because they buy into what that business is trying to do in the world. So a really significant vision that's very, very clear. I mean, the one I like the most, I often come back to if I'm trying to help a business work through its own vision, is the UK Alzheimer's Society, which is a world without Alzheimer's. That's what they dream of. That's their vision. That's what they want one day. It's big. It's huge. It's, it may take decades. Who knows? Hopefully not. But everybody knows that that's what they're trying to do. So there's no ambiguity about that. So coming up with that big vision that everybody can buy into, and then the next big skill is get out of the way and help remove all the other things that are in the way of your people working towards that vision. Because as a leader, I think often, because of that sometimes desire to control, sometimes the ego gets in the way, sometimes technically maybe, or from an experience point of view, maybe you do have more experience or knowledge historically than everybody else in the organization, perhaps, who knows. But actually that desire to kind of influence things gets in the way of people dynamically and in an agile fashion, in response to all the change that's going on, coming up with their own answers and their own solutions, which it comes back to trust again, doesn't it? So it's vision and trust. So have the vision, be the compass when people maybe lose sight of that, always reminding people, inspiring people to come back to the vision, but get out of the way and get other things out of the way that are stopping people being successful. So I think that removes fear. I think if the leader is seen to be trusting, then people in the organization stop fearing things quite so much, because they feel in the end, they trust in the end that this is going to work, that this will work out. And I think when you sent me the invitation to do this, you sent me thoughts. There was one thing that you referred to in that brief, if you like, which was, what would be a final reflection. And I thought about that. And then what came to me quite strongly was that, as I went from a child to an adult, and from an adult into the working environment, and from working to leading, again, it was this, what I started to fear failure in a way that I didn't fear when I was a child. Children do not fear failure. They fear missing out on having a go. So if they're watching, if there's one bike and 6 children, everybody wants to go on the bike first, right? And the one who goes last is worried they're not going to get a go, or they're only going to get one go when everybody else got 2 goes. They don't think about what it will be like on the bike, or if they fell off the bike, or if if they hurt themselves if they fell off the bike. They don't. They just think about that. So I would say that if you're a leader, or frankly anybody really in business, never lose the joy of wanting to have a go. I mean, just have a go and reconnect with that excitement, and trust actually that it will be okay, that it will work out. And if you do fall off the bike, have another go. But I think I spent too much time as a leader worrying about what would happen if I fell off the bike, rather than really wanting to get on it. And so reconnecting with that kind of childhood lack of fear is probably the one thought I would leave anybody with in this kind of discussion. Thank you, Daniel.